public, for the public.
The Great War of Words, tomorrow morning at 9 on BBC Radio 4.
And a special edition of Woman's Hour examines how the First World War shaped the lives of a generation of women. That's on Wednesday morning at 10. But now it's time for Beyond Belief. Here's Ernie Ray.
Hello. When is a Muslim not a Muslim? Officially, anyone who declares his conviction that there is one God and Muhammad is his prophet is a Muslim. But it seems there may be exceptions to that rule. In May 2010, members of an extremist Islamist group entered 2 mosques in Lahore in Pakistan and opened fire, killing at least 86 people, all of them belonging to a group calling themselves Ahmadi Muslims. There are about 12 million Ahmadi worldwide, and their headquarters, which was originally in Pakistan, is now in London. But even in the UK at times, they feel themselves to be under threat from some whom they regard as their fellow Muslims. Joining me to discuss the Ahmadi are Imam Rashid from the Ahmadi London Mosque, which is the first mosque in London, Dr. Saib Blair, the General Secretary of the Islamic Party of Britain, and Dr. Simon Valentine, a writer and freelance consultant and the author of the book Islam and the Ahmadiyya Jamaat. Rashid, are you a Muslim?
Yes, by the grace of Allah, I am a Muslim, and I am very satisfied to say that I believe in Islam whatever it requires, and I try my best to comply with that.
Saib, is Rashid a Muslim?
By his own profession he is. By the standard of mainstream Islam he is not. It is a new religion that deviates from the core beliefs of what Islam requires you to believe in order to be a Muslim.
Simon?
In mainstream Islam, there is a tradition, a story in which the angel Gabriel appeared to the Prophet Muhammad and asked him about the faith. And he responded by saying that what's important is belief in Allah, angels, his books, his messengers, and the last day. Now, on those grounds, I'd say without doubt, Rashid is a Muslim. He observes the 5 pillars of Islam like any Muslim, and I'd say yes, he is a Muslim.
Well, the Ahmadi all began with a man called Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Who was he, Rashid?
Well, he was a very pious man who was born in 1835 in Qadian, and from his early age he was dedicated to religious activities. He was the one who very strongly felt that the Muslims at that time, in the 19th century, they had deviated from the right path. And moreover, at the same time, Islam was under attack from other religions. So he felt very strongly that somebody should be responding to these criticism, and he took up the pen and started writing.
Saib, what claims did he make for himself?
Well, maybe Rashid can make a better case here, but from our understanding, he claimed to be a new prophet, and this is what puts him outside the fold of mainstream Islam. So it's quite a tricky situation.
Simon, let's just clarify. He claimed to be a prophet, and the whole point is that, according to mainstream Islam, the last prophet was Muhammad. What sort of a prophet was Mirza Ghulam Ahmad?
Well, he used certain Arabic terms. He said he was Zili, a shadowy prophet, Ummati, a lesser prophet. He interpreted Hataman Nabiyyin, the seal of the prophet, which is a phrase from the Quran, to mean not that Muhammad was the final prophet, but he was the father of prophets, the greatest of prophets. So you could still have prophets after Muhammad, albeit lesser prophets. And he claimed to be one of those lesser prophets.
Rashid?
I think what he has just mentioned, that is absolutely correct. Because to simply say that he claimed to be a prophet, that gives the misunderstanding to the people as if he has brought a new law, a new Sharia, as if he is starting a new religion. That is not the case. He only claimed that he is a subordinate prophet, and he said that I haven't brought anything new, because I have just following what the Quran says and what my master, the Holy Prophet of Islam, is saying.
Saib?
Well, He also claimed to have been born as Mary and become Jesus. He claimed to be the Messiah. He wants to be the Mahdi. He wants to be many things to many people. There's a bit of Krishna in there. He also says Guru Nanak was a Muslim and he follows that. But politically, I think a little bit of background might be helpful. In 1857, we had the mutiny in India, and it was a difficult time for the British Empire. And as a kind of solution for this problem, the British Empire, the colonial empire, started to create movements in various Islamic countries in order to start breaking up the Turkish Caliphate, the Turkish Empire, and shift the loyalty to the British Empire. There was a conference in London in 1870 which published a report and came to the conclusion that because Indians are known to unquestioningly follow their religious leaders, if one could produce a new minor prophet of Muslims who would preach loyalty to the British Empire, then that would produce the desired result. And then we see in 1872 Mirza Ghulam Ahmad starts writing articles. In 1889 he starts his movement, and in 1899 he himself writes that I spent the greatest part of my life preaching loyalty to the British Empire.
So Rashid, he was a tool of British imperialism.
Well, I think but the story we have listened is a time-old story which is always repeated like that. But there is no substance in that one. And he only praised the British for the just and the right things which he did.
Simon.
But there is no substance in that.
Yeah, we need to be clear on certain things, and that within the Ummah worldwide and so on, there's many conspiracy theories which are conspiracy theories with nothing to substantiate them. Sahib has mentioned Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. It's believed that the British began, the Hemfer Diaries, the British began Wahhabism to divide and rule the Muslim world. The same accusation is made against the Ahmadiyya. There is absolutely nothing to support those views.
Sahib, it is true to say that the core of Islamic belief and practice is the 5 pillars of Islam, and the Ahmadi follow the 5 pillars of Islam.
I don't think you can put it that simply. The core of Islam is the Shahada, is to bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his final messenger. And I say final messenger because it is very clear, 1.5 millennia of orthodox canonical Islam make it very clear that there isn't going to be another law-giving messenger, a Rasul, or even minor messenger or prophet, a Nabi. There isn't going to be any of those after him. They're only going to be pretenders. So anybody who then comes and claims to be a prophet moves himself outside that fold of canonical interpretation of mainstream Islam of 1.5 millennia.
So what Rashid, what Sahib is saying is that the Ahmadi disobey the first pillar of Islam. They do not believe that there is only one last prophet.
This is absolutely incorrect. Ahmadis believe not only in the first pillar of Islam, rather all the pillars of Islam. And to translate the first pillar, that as Muhammad is the last prophet, the word last is nowhere mentioned in the original text of the Arabic word. So therefore that is an addition. And to say that the people all over the time, throughout the history, they have been believing it, that no law-bearing prophet can come. That is exactly what we say. The founder of the Ahmadiyya community never ever claimed that he is a prophet with a new law.
I suspect we've reached an unbridgeable gulf between Sahib and Rashid in the fact that your definition of what it means to be the last prophet. But Simon, let me come to the second thing that distinguishes the Ahmadi from mainstream Islam, which is the idea of the caliphate, the descendant of this prophet Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. And he established a line of succession, and he believed, and the Ahmadi believe, in a caliphate. And that caliphate has to be the leader of the whole Muslim community?
The whole Muslim community. What is controversial is that the Ahmadi claim that the Khalifa is a direct descendant of the Prophet himself. So there's the line of authority, legitimization from the time of a Prophet in the 7th century to the present time. So the present Khalifa is a direct descendant. Now, of course, that is unacceptable to mainstream Islam. The Khalifa in the Ahmadiyya Mahdi, it is believed he is the leader of the Ummah worldwide. Most Muslims would say, yeah, okay, he can be the leader of the Ahmadi community, but he's not the leader of the Ummah internationally. Sahib.
Yes, it's almost a little bit like a corporate takeover attempt. People these days understand business better than they understand religion. So what we're dealing with here is kind of trademark infringement. Let me give you an example. Let's say a group of young people start a football club and call themselves Manchester United. And then they take their logo. And then they even say the original Manchester United are just a bunch of pretenders. We are the real thing. And now you will probably understand that this football club will take some action against them and say, well, hang on, you can't do that. And it's the same thing here. There comes a new religion with all kinds of different claims that never were heard of before, and suddenly they want to be in charge of it all.
Rashid.
I think the point of Khilafat is being confused here. To say that we believe that the Caliph, the supreme head of the community, is directly descendant of the Holy Prophet of Islam, nobody has ever said like that. What we believe is that Khilafat is a spiritual system of leadership which God Almighty has promised in the Holy Quran to the community of the believers. And what we say is that after the demise of the founder of the community, before that he said that God Almighty has told me that after my demise a system of caliphate is going to be established in my community, and that was done. And there is no such requirement that a person should be direct descendant of the founder of the community. So the very first caliph was not related to him at all.
So we've got two things in which you disagree. We've got the prophethood and we've got the caliphate. There is a third, Rashid, I'd like to put to you, which is the concept of jihad. How do you differ from mainstream Islam in your interpretation of jihad, which is, most people interpret as holy war?
Well, first of all, let me say that the word jihad is an Arabic word, which means to put in your best effort to achieve a noble objective. Jihad with your own self, jihad of spending your wealth and spreading the message of God. And if it comes to that Muslims are under attack to defend themselves, that is also a lesser form of jihad. But when the situation is not like that, Muslims are not being killed because of their being Muslims, but rather the name of Islam, the name of the Prophet, the text of the Quran is being criticized through pen, the misuse of the pen, I should say. In that case, it is very essential. We have to make the proper use of the pen, and that is waging the jihad with the pen.
Saib, that seems to be perfectly fair and normal.
I have no issues with that. Jihad is an Arabic term that means utmost struggle. But at this particular time of Britain wanting to assert its authority over India, as I quoted already from the writings of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad.
In the 19th century.
Yes, it is. He said he spent the greatest part of his life preaching loyalty to the British government and fighting the jihadist mentality. So he was set up, I would say, to preach that the Indians should not fight the British colonial government, and it was a better government for them than the Turkish caliphate that other Muslims obeyed.
So we've got prophethood, Simon. We've got caliphate. We've got jihad. There is a fourth area of disagreement, which is on the position of Jesus. What do the Ahmadi believe happened to Jesus?
Mirza Ghulam Ahmad taught that Jesus wasn't taken up into heaven as the Quran teaches, but he lived to a ripe old age. He moved to Srinagar in Indian Kashmir, where he had many children, lived to a ripe age, and there he died. His tomb can be seen today. I've visited it and so on. But that obviously caused a storm of controversy within mainstream Islam.
And Rashid, the importance of that is that if Jesus died, he can't come again. There will be no second coming of Jesus. But as I understand it, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad thought that his coming was the second coming of Jesus.
Yes, he did claim that he is the second coming of Jesus, but not the self-same person who was son of Mary. But he said he came in the same way as the Elijah came in the form of John the Baptist.
Well, let me remind you that you're listening to Beyond Belief, and today we're discussing the Ahmadi, a breakaway group from mainstream Islam, which is suffering considerable persecution in parts of the Muslim world. And with me are Saib Blair, Imam Rashid, and Simon Valentine. Dr. Barry Malik is a leading member of the Ahmadi community. He lives in Bradford, where the Ahmadi community is strong and prosperous. He was born in Kenya, where the Ahmadi lived at peace with their Muslim neighbours. In the mid-1960s, when he was 10, his family moved to Pakistan.
Initially, everything was fine. People were living peacefully, no discrimination whatsoever. But then in 1974, there was a countrywide violent agitation against Ahmadi Muslims. And I personally witnessed seeing mutilated bodies arriving in Rabwa, people who were murdered by non-Ahmadi Muslims. And especially one incident which left a scar on my life was when I met a young lady who had arrived in Rabwa from a place called Gujranwala, where her husband and her eldest son were brutally murdered, and then their bodies were left unattended on roads for 48 hours. So those were the scars that left mark on my whole life, that why so much hatred against any person because of that person's beliefs.
Now, your family had British nationality, so you got out of Pakistan and you came to live in Bradford. What was the attitude of other Muslims towards you at that time?
Well, for first 9 years until 1984, the attitude was fine. We were all living harmoniously. It all changed in 1984 when the supreme head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community had to migrate from Pakistan to Britain, and a military dictator called General Ziaul Haq was ruling Pakistan. He was a brutal ruler, and especially against the Ahmadis, he introduced a new law where Ahmadis were not even allowed to pose like Muslims, or sharing greetings, Muslim greetings with others. He started sending some fanatic mullahs from Pakistan who started inciting hatred, preaching violence, and suddenly things started getting deteriorated. And in 1986, our mosque was being refurbished, so we decided to hold Religious Founders Day, which we hold every year. Suddenly we started hearing some noises outside the buildings. We couldn't believe we saw a mob of about 200 Muslims chanting slogans against the Ahmadiyya community, and suddenly this one of their leaders, one of the mullahs, entered the building and he spat on my face. I couldn't believe the level of hatred that I could witness in this country.
Was the Ahmadi community part of the Council of Mosques at that time?
No, Council of the Mosques never accepted Ahmadis because they believe that we are not Muslims. And if I could give you one example, Bradford Council decided to have Eid lights outside every mosque. Council for the Mosque opposed this, saying that if you are going to have these lights outside Ahmadiyya Mosque, we will not allow that. So after having few sessions of meetings and discussions, Bradford Council decided not to have any lights whatsoever.
What are relations like now?
Well, things have improved because some young people have become the leaders of Council for the Mosques, and at least we can talk to them, not like 1980s when they didn't even want to shake hands with us or talk to us.
Do you actually want to be part of the Muslim community?
They can't separate us. We are Muslims by birth, and I think we are more practicing Muslims than they are.
That was Dr. Barry Malik. And Saib, how do you respond to that interview?
Well, I think it's atrocious to hear the story of persecution, and I think there's no justification for this, because when you have a dispute with somebody within your own religion or with other religions, then you settle them by best argument, by convincing people, by research, by pointing to the facts, and not by this kind of making people feel outsiders or outcasts. So no, I have every sympathy with him. And I think that is not justifiable, because it also deflects from the very fact that here are theological differences that need to be settled, and they cannot be settled in that manner.
When Barry and his family go to Pakistan, that country very soon becomes a difficult place for the Ahmadi to live in. Simon.
Yeah, in 1974, Ali Bhutto, the constitution was changed in Pakistan, where Ahmadi were classed officially as non-Muslim. This was then continued under General Zia-ul Haq, his process of Islamization, and the introduction of a Pakistan Penal Code, basically which outlawed the practice of Ahmadi as a faith. Hence people like Barry Malik coming to this country, fleeing the persecution which arose at that time.
But I think regarding the persecution, in Pakistan only something has been mentioned, just like as a tip of the iceberg. Actually, this is a process which is ongoing. Before the partition and after the partition in 53, countrywide agitation was there. In 74, after long, there was a persecution wave started, and the legislation, as we have heard. And then in 84, the notorious Ordinance 20 was promulgated. As a result of that, anybody, any Ahmadi who declares or poses or behaves or gives an impression of being a Muslim in any way, he was liable to 3 years imprisonment, and the whole property can be confiscated. Now the sword of this Ordinance 20 is always hanging over the head of every Ahmadi in Pakistan.
And the significance of that for this country, Sahib, is that according to Barry Malik, Zia al-Haq sent mullahs over here who imbibed that sort of philosophy of persecution against the Ahmadis, and they are here at present, and that has seeped from Pakistan into places like Bradford.
I think some of the communities here will bring with them the baggage that they have from where they came from. But I think we also need to separate a couple of things, because if somebody is spat in the face, that's discrimination and unacceptable. If somebody is persecuted, like we've heard, that's unacceptable. But if you disagree with somebody, if you say they're not Muslims, just like they say about me, I'm not a proper Muslim. If I would not be buried in their graveyard if I wanted to, because I don't give the bay'at to their leader, well, that is not discrimination, that is a disagreement. And we have to separate these things. What happened in Pakistan under Bhutto? And Bhutto himself actually only followed the popular trend, because the Ahmadis were quite close to the Pakistan People's Party, but he had no choice but to follow the popular trend there, is that the National Assembly in Pakistan decided that to be a Muslim means that you accept the finality of the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad. And then later Zia al-Haq brought in the ordinances which went a way deal further, and I think are probably way too far. But this National Assembly decision, well, we need to understand there was partition and we have a Muslim state. A Christian cannot be the president of the State of Israel, and neither can a Jew be the head of the Vatican state, nor can a non-Muslim be the head, let's say, of the Muslim state of Pakistan. So the question is, do we agree with theological or with religious states? But if we do, then it's not discrimination. The Sikhs can't also be presidents of Pakistan, nor can the Hindus. So why should the Ahmadis, if we do not consider them as Muslims?
But it goes further than that, Simon, because if you look, we've already established that in Pakistan there's considerable persecution of the Ahmadi. There is also in Indonesia, when there is pressure on the government to ban the Ahmadis.
It's worldwide. Yeah, it's worldwide, even in the UK. But I think with Barry there, he personifies there, embodies, he's talking about Bradford. I also am from Bradford, and it typifies the persecution that the Ahmadiyya are facing in a city like Bradford. If I can just give one example, Ernie. There were riots, anti-Ahmadi riots, similar to the ones that occurred in Pakistan in 1953, in Bradford in 1980, which caught the attention of the international media. But in 1996, just to give you one glimpse of the persecution, the council produced a directory of minority faith groups, and they placed the Ahmadi in the Muslim section, and the Council of Mosque complained. The council had to change it. They put Ahmadi as other faiths. Obviously the Ahmadi complained about that, so hence they had to withdraw the directory. Rashid.
I agree with this thing last mentioned. I was actually in picture at that time. They wrote to me that we want to put your name into the non-Muslim category, and we can allocate you half a page or full page. I immediately refused. Our place is in Islam. It has to go there that way. If not, then you have no right to put us into the category of non-Muslims. Anyway, that they did not do.
It all comes down to the fact, basically, that there seems to be a determination on the behalf of what I can call mainstream Muslims to define that the Ahmadi are not Muslims. And I wonder why there is such antagonism in this country between mainstream Muslims and Ahmadi. Is it fear that mainstream Muslims might be recruited by the Ahmadi?
I don't think that mainstream Islam is bothered about the Ahmadi, except when Ahmadiyya people come and want to take their position as the rightful representatives of Islam when they're a minute minority, and that status shouldn't be afforded to them. But it is usually afforded to them very often by people in the establishment because they rendered such a good service to the establishment, and they were the first to be allowed into this country to establish themselves. And yes, there are political issues at stake. When it comes to political issues, when it comes to who speaks for the Muslims, who is the rightful representative, then it does matter whether theological. You can't have a Protestant speaking for Catholics. It just doesn't go.
Rashid, I suspect we might have come to the crux of the matter, because the Ahmadi have an in to government, because they perceive you as being a moderate, peace-loving voice within Islam, and there is a degree of resentment among mainstream Islam because of that position.
Well, that is not the case. Ahmadis are lawful, law-abiding citizens of this country. If they have got the potential, if they have got the ability, and if they are given a high position or the say which is granted to all the people, because the freedom is there in the country, so then they should be given.
Simon.
See, even if the Ahmadi have got the Prime Minister's ear, good on them. You know, again, we talk about political freedom, democracy and so on. It doesn't justify mainstream Islam persecuting the Ahmadiyya Jamaat. I look at Islam and it is a good, tolerant faith. There are hadith which teach that Muhammad actually said that you your religion, me mine. There's hadith which state that no one has the right to say another person is not a Muslim. Only God knows the heart. So what is the justification for persecuting Ahmadiyya?
I agree, there's no justification for persecution. That does, on the other hand, not give a group the right to make themselves the spokespeople of Islam when their religion is something completely different. And it's something different not just because of the finality of the prophethood, but for many other things, many other beliefs, like that God is everywhere, which they borrow from Sikhism, and so on. There are differences that separate them from Islam, and just like I wouldn't speak for the Catholic Church, they can't speak for mainstream Islam. It just isn't on. But there is no justification for persecution.
I want to ask each one of you a final question as we draw this programme to a close. If a Muslim came to you saying they were thinking of becoming an Ahmadi, what would you say to them, Saib?
I would tell them to read extensively everything that they say about themselves, compare it with what mainstream Islam says, because these people don't know their own religion. So before they start moving or converting, they need to study their own religion and the religion of others, and then they can make an informed decision. And it's the informed decision that is important, because otherwise, what's the whole point?
And Rashid, if somebody came to you saying that they wanted to convert to become an Ahmadi, what would you say to them?
Well, we would say, most welcome, but we would also say that everybody, may be Christian, may be a non-Ahmadi, they are most welcome to become Ahmadi. We welcome them, but we do say that fully understand it, so that you should not be having any doubt in your mind. Understand everything properly, and then with full conviction, then you come forward and you will be received with open arms.
Simon.
I'd say in a democratic society, in a free society, everyone should have the right and the freedom to choose their own path in life and choose the way they want to find peace with God. If they find that path in the Ahmadiyya Jamaat, please, good on them.
Well, that's all for this week. My thanks to Simon Valentine, Saib Blair and Imam Rashid. I'll be back at the same time next week when I hope you'll join me.